scripted or anything. So I think this is the sixth episode.
What time?
How long do you want to talk for?
I would need to be finished by 3 at the latest.
What time is it now?
10 past 1.
That's okay. We're only doing like an hour or so.
So it's okay.
Even half an hour, 40
No,
minutes.
you're calm on me. No,
Yeah.
So 3 o'clock and tons of.
Yeah, so it's my speaker's in, so hopefully it sounds a little bit better.
Everybody hears you this time.
Yeah, so this is I think the 6th or 7th episode of, it's called the Irish and British podcast. And on this episode is Mervyn Gibson, who's the secretary, not the Grand Master, the secretary of the Orange and
Grand
Belfast.
Secretary of the Grand Orange Lords of Ireland.
The Grand Secretary?
Yes.
Okay, wow. Well,
No need to do that whatsoever.
do you not bring your sash?
No, I didn't bring the sash. I don't carry it around with me.
I'll just go straight into it and just ask, first of all, would you consider yourself Irish?
I'm first and primary a Christian, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
My first citizenship was in heaven, but obviously that's not what we're here to talk about. So I'm British, I regard myself as British, but I'm also Irish as well. I'm born in the end of Ireland, I'm Northern Irish, so I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah.
Quite proud of that part of me, that is Northern Irish within the British United Kingdom context.
Yeah. I should have said as well, you're a minister.
Presbyterian minister.
Don't know if everyone knows. I think you just get caught up seeing you that you're the.
I think sadly, or well not sadly, just that sometimes I'd be on speaking about church matters, or not as often as I would be on talking about politics.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm a community commentator without grand knowledge today. I'm just Mervyn Gibson.
Yeah.
I'm always cautious about saying wearing several different hats, because people think they need a big head for that.
Yeah.
And certainly that's not the case. But today I'm just talking to myself. But yes, I am a minister. I'm a community activist in East Belfast, and I'm also Grand Secretary of the Grand Orange Lords of Ireland.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool.
I'm not forgetting a husband and a father and all the
things.
Well.
I suppose that's what's interesting. I'm not going to lie to you, because
I'm a minister, you're just not going to lie.
No, I'm not going to lie to you. Even someone who's a soft unionist, someone who describes himself as very, very pale orange, because of maybe the media and whatnot, you meet the characters like yourself and how you're presented, and you're like, oh yeah, my daughter. Like, oh, this guy has a daughter. There's no like this guy hides in the shadows, and even raising a family. And I remember someone telling me about what do you call him, Jeffrey? No, the DUP MLA for East London there.
Gregory Campbell.
That he had a couple of daughters, and this is a few years ago now, but I think that's maybe, some people, the more extreme people will be surprised that that you're a husband and a father, because I think Orangeman and that.
But it's easier to get people to dehumanising.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens in Northern Ireland. It's been exaggerated by Twitter and all that social media attacking on people. It just tends to attack them either over physical appearance, over what they've said, take something out of context, or maybe within context, and they just troll them and whatever.
Yeah. So
there is this demonisation of people, and it's wrong. It doesn't add to the dialogue, conversation, and political discourse.
Yeah.
In fact, it ruins it in many cases.
Absolutely. And look, as I said, I had some prejudices and bigotries to overcome. I think if I go back far enough, I maybe have members of the family who are in the Orange Order, certainly up in Bush Mills, where my father was raised. There's an Orange Hall behind his mother's house, so it'd be almost strange if they weren't an Orange. But meeting the likes of yourself, chatting with you, having coffee, Mark Neal, different characters, and seeing you in the field and chatting with your other friends, my views certainly mellowed a lot. So people are probably wondering, can you explain maybe just what the Orange Order means to you as a child, or whenever you joined, and as you've grown up, and what it means now?
Sure, the Orange Order has always been part of my life, I have to say. From as early as both grandfathers were in the Orange Order. One was a Donegal Orangeman. He'd been in the original UVF. Both grandfathers were in the 36 Ulster Division, and at the Somme. So that's natural affinity towards the Orange and unionism. My father and mother both in the Orange, both deceased sadly now, but my mother was a honorary Deputy Grand Mistress of Ireland. My father was very active in Belfast, particularly East Belfast. So it was natural I joined the Orange Order when I was 7. Indeed, my earliest memory as a child of anything is a Covenant Day in 1962, the 50th anniversary. I was only 4, but I remember going to watch it with my auntie
Class.
because my father and mother were walking in the parade.
Yeah.
So I joined the order as early as I could. I think it was 7 in those
Yeah.
days. I would have been carrying the string
Yeah.
on a banner from I was 5.
Yeah.
So it was part of my growing up.
Yeah.
The Troubles came along and that cemented my membership of the Orange Order in many ways, because communities were pulling together, going unionists, nationalists, you
Yeah.
had to support your own,
Yeah.
you had to defend your own areas. But equally there comes a stage where you decide you want to stay in the institution. It's not a case I'm still in the institution because my father and my grandfather were in it. You have to decide what's the values of the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
And the values for me, the organisation, it was an organisation for promoting the Reformed faith. So it was a Protestant organisation,
Yeah.
which probably maybe wasn't as important at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Become more important to me later in life when I came to faith as I became a Christian. But equally, it was important in the early days as well, because the Troubles were defined as Protestant and Catholic
Yeah.
in the early days. But there was also that aspect of it was there to defend the Union.
Mm-hmm.
And probably that was a bigger motivator for keeping me in
Mm-hmm.
the institution. It was there to defend the Union. And ultimately it's a social organisation as well. You know, many of the friends that I had in the institution when I was a junior, shall we say, are still friends today.
Mm-hmm.
And I know them, or we've married girls that we knew from that time,
Mm-hmm.
and we still keep in touch. The best friend I've known from I was in the juniors.
Yeah.
You know, so there is that fraternal and social side
Yeah.
of the institution. So it's part of my life. Equally, at times I've been more active in the institution than others. When I was in the police,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't as active in the institution as a
Mhm.
member, but I wasn't as active because there's other things going on in my life,
Mhm.
mainly work and serving in the police. But after I retired, became a minister, became more involved in the institution.
Yeah.
But still, my primary job is a minister of
Yeah.
the church, congregation. That's who I serve. But equally, all my spare time virtually would be taken up with the institution.
Yeah, I suppose when I said, you know, my views mellowed a lot, it was like get to know the likes of yourself and Mark Neal and Aaron Callan. One of the other big ones was being in Drummond Monaghan, and I've said this before in the podcast, but a fella coming up to me and I joked, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Don't be bottling me with your glass bottle." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And then he introduced me to his sister and started elaborating on how important it was as a community that they're like their loyalist band. So it's how they perceive the like a what is it the Jim McWilliams paintings. Remember, you know, that it would just be all the bands men pissing up against the Irish News and rioting and the mayhem of
Sure.
Orangeman. So there's the perception, and then there's the reality that, you know, it's a bread and butter of your very existence.
It's part of the fabric of Northern Ireland life, the institution, and it permeates all sections of life.
Mm-hmm.
The size of our organisation with members in every trade almost, you know, and represented several levels of society. So we've been there for quite a while. But the point is that people would like to put us into a box
Yeah.
that we're big. They would like to brand us by the incidents that were savoury, shall we say,
Yeah.
or like to brand us by the Troubles. But we're beyond that. We're an organisation 200 years old. There's much to us, much more to us than just the Troubles.
It's just funny, you know, when you look down south, there's a guy I follows called Buff Egan, and he's sort of like this celebrity, social media celebrity for the GAA.
Yeah.
And coming 12, he's like, "Get these orange bastards out of here, go back to England." And then that's one extreme, and then you've got Fianna Gael send up a delegation to watch it, but then you'll have a Fianna Fáil backbencher saying, "What on earth's going on there? Why is a Dublin minister meeting with a hate group or something?" So there's those perceptions that are enduring, but you've done a lot to reach a hand across the aisle, both in Northern Ireland and down south. You've met with.
I met with Radga and other people down
Check,
there.
just keep talking.
I've met with many people. To be honest,
Still working.
outside the minute, to be honest, the Orange Institution don't work with Sinn Féin as an organisation, but previous to my post as Grand Secretary, I met with Sinn Féin, did I serve with them on several reviews of parades and other committees. But certainly I'll meet with anybody who's prepared to listen. There's not much point meeting someone who just is going to shout and roar and brand his Ku Klux Klan on us. It's absolute nonsense. And that's the one probably that annoys most because it's so inaccurate. But if some backbencher in the south needs his votes and he needs to condemn the Orange Order, you're going to get that. But thankfully the leadership of the parties are much more forward thinking and they have an interest in talking to us. Not only because of who we are and our position within Northern Ireland, the influence that we have, but also because we have membership in the south,
Yeah.
and the Protestant community in the south hasn't been treated well over the years
Yeah.
in many ways, and that's something that the south are trying to address. There maybe is still a lot to do, but I think there's a willingness to recognise
Yeah.
that they haven't been as good a government towards the Protestant and Orange community in the south.
Yeah.
Those who see themselves, as I described it, Faradga, as Irish citizens because they're born there, but they're culturally British.
Yeah.
So they are a minority within that state,
Yeah.
a minority that hasn't been well served by the state.
Yeah.
So I think they're beginning to look at that, how they address that. But that's at the top. It'll take a while to go down to local areas.
Yeah.
And where there's good relationships in many areas, there are those people like you referred to backbenchers going to
Yeah.
say they're orange to this and they're hate-filled and
Yeah.
and all those attributes which are wrong, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I'm not saying we've been a perfect organisation over the years. I'm not saying we've had members who haven't stepped outside the pale, shall we say,
Yeah.
and things haven't happened that shouldn't have happened. But that's been life in Northern Ireland. We've just lived through the troubles where 1 in 10 of every person killed was a member of the Orange institution.
Yeah.
Now think about that statistic, 1 in 10
Yeah.
of everyone killed in the troubles
Uh-huh.
was a member of the Orange institution. The vast majority of our members had joined the security forces, the police, the UDR, the prison service, and that's why they were murdered.
Yeah.
Others were murdered simply because they were Protestants and lived along the border
Yeah.
or in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we suffered greatly during the troubles. So it's understandable when people did things that they shouldn't have done. It's not excusable in many ways, but it's understandable. We were living in different times. And one of the words that I always find, I said this to several people, missing from conversations is context. Look at what was going on that day.
Yeah.
Look at what was the situation in the world, in the United Kingdom, and the All Ireland generally.
Yeah.
What was happening, and we were no different. We weren't bucking the trend. We were part of that trend.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as the claims that the state was totally anti-Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense.
Mhm.
You look at any study of it that's done in an impartial way, you'll see the Roman Catholic Church wanted their own school system. We ultimately supported that.
Yeah.
Ultimately paid for that. So this state who hated Roman Catholic allegedly pays for that system. They say the police became a Protestant force.
Yeah.
Well, if the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Church comes out when the state's a few years old and says Roman Catholics shouldn't join the police,
Yeah.
and it was very much the church had a lot of control within their communities at that stage,
Yeah.
people weren't going to join.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you did join and there was a campaign, and bear in mind there was almost a campaign every decade of our existence,
Yeah.
that they shot Roman Catholic policemen because they were
Yeah.
easy to shoot, they lived in their own areas, they
Yeah.
knew who they were. So you weren't going to join, so de facto it become a Protestant
Yeah.
police force,
Yeah.
but it was never set out for that.
Yeah.
And probably the most famous quote of all, a Protestant state for Protestant people,
Yeah.
was said actually in a field in the 12th day, but it wasn't promoting that. It
Yeah.
was saying that in relation to De Valera wanted a Roman Catholic
Yeah.
Ireland for a Roman Catholic people,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
And it was saying that we had started off wanted the state for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that needs to be looked in context.
Yeah.
There's no context.
Yeah.
A lot of things that Republicans say, they take them out of context and misquote them.
Yeah, I think that's what, I've been on a bit of a journey, but I think that was one of the key moments that sort of made me reconsider things, just the fact that is said almost daily. Like,
Absolutely.
day will not go by without you hearing like, oh, it's a Protestant state, how could you ever do it? And you're like, that's okay, but you do realise that was a statement expressed in response to.
Exactly. Read the full quote.
Yeah.
The context is the same as the other old favourite is discrimination. Was there discrimination in Northern Ireland? I'm not saying there was none.
Yeah.
Of course
Yeah.
there was. But was there discrimination in the south against the Protestants who stayed? Of course there was. Why did 50,000 disappear?
Yeah.
40,000, whatever it is, disappear? Was there discrimination in Scotland? Of course there was. You know, if I was Jamaican and went to a Welsh coal mine
Yeah.
in 1925, would I have got a job?
Yeah.
No, because it was from my son Daffy or my grandson Daffy would have got the job.
Yeah.
So is that discrimination?
Yeah.
Looking back, of course it is,
Yeah.
right? But not at the time. So people have to look at the context
Yeah.
of the day. And Republicans are particularly good at highlighting what Northern Ireland Protestants or unions have done over the years,
Yeah.
but never put it in context
Yeah.
of the world context of what was going on in society.
My friend's a missionary over in Portugal at the moment. I actually, because I met my wife at the Baptist, I go to a Presbyterian church now, but I went to Baptist church, and I've had relations there for years now. But he was telling us that up until it wasn't, basically they got rid of their dictatorship. You know, it was illegal to be Protestant. You know, in that context.
There's all sorts of things like that around the world, but equally, and it's said several times that the Republican propaganda machine is particularly good at it, and sadly we believe that. I think we could have a propaganda machine just as good if people would begin to speak up and be proud of who they are and where they're from. Sadly, there's a trend within the unionist community not to do that. That they don't shout about it, because then they're branded or associated with the Orange Order, which middle class buys into some of this misnomons about we are. Because I've never met anybody who grandfather, grandmother wasn't in the Orange or connected to the Orange. They're all good people. But nowadays, I wouldn't join it, wouldn't be associated with it. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think you have to be in this to buy into the values and systems of the Orange Institute, particularly the values and rules of the institution. It's a free organisation to join, a free organisation to leave. So if you don't see yourself as wanting to promote or defend the Reformed faith, then don't join. If you don't see yourself as British, then don't join. If you don't like some of the rules, don't join. But I think there's an awful lot of people share value systems, share Britishness, but they don't join because they don't want to be stigmatised or demonised at work. It'll affect their promotions. Because it's trendy now to be in the GAA and be a nationalist at work. In fact, you wear it as a badge of honour. Sadly, it's still demonised to be a unionist in many organisations. I use the police as an example. The police in there, the pendulum swung too far in the green of the police in many ways. I remember talking to one of the previous chief constables about this, and they more or less agreed that they've tried and find new friends post ceasefire. They forgot their old friends in the unionist community and almost turned people against them by not recruiting from that community, by discrimination. And even today, there's a PSNI GAA club, and you'll be fated for doing anything Irish in the police. But could you imagine if you told the chief constable you're going to start an Orange Lodge in the police?
Of course.
Indeed, you still have to declare your membership if you're asked before you go out and get it tested on their day passing out. So you could belong to the Francis Hughes GAA club, or his Terrace GAA club, or whatever name of a particular Republican, and be in the police and play GAA and get a plot of it. And I have no issue, don't get me wrong, against the playing GAA, but you couldn't be the same side. I'm in a defender's band, and I want to start a band in the police and be part of that. And no, you'd be demonised, and probably you'd have to leave, you'd be forced to leave. So there is a discrimination still, and that would go through other jobs as well, where if you're going for a management job somewhere and you were active in the Orange Order, I would say it would go against it, because we don't want that associated. Of course. But all of a sudden you're GAA, that's promoted, and we sponsor that, and we sponsor this. Sadly, the lack of support for unionism at a business class and a middle class and upper classes is sadly lacking. Yet not people there are unionists and hold the same values, but they're not just prepared to come out and say the same. There's a whole lot of reasons for that.
Obviously I'm in the arts, and especially going down south, there's no end of murals with Michael Collins and De Valera and Pierce and so on and so forth. No end of posts online. Even if you go to that Royal Ulster Academy, there'll be a picture of Patrick Pierce, but you would never see a painting of Carson or Craig or any of those characters.
Well, I think that's historic too, in that the arts tended to be something that Roman Catholics feared towards, because they believed they couldn't get jobs in other areas. And I remember when it came up to 2012, the 100th anniversary of Covenant, I spoke to several artists. I spoke to the Arts Council, I spoke to ministers at the time. I can't remember if it was Northern Ireland Office or our own executive at that time. But could we commission some plays? Could we commission some art? Because the only play that gets wheeled out for unions is Observe the Sons of Ulster, March towards the Sun. Good enough play, bit of issues with some of it, depends who's producing it. Good, but it's the only ones wheeled out. We don't have a Yeats to bring a whole list of plays out. We do in a way, because you've seen Mervyn and others that we can turn to, but they're not promoted in the same way. The same with paintings. Nobody's painting other than yourself in a game. Nobody goes out and paints the Troth Day. We did. It's a good painting, Portadown, the Troth Day.
That's amazing.
It's a great painting. But that again, if you're only looking at one, where you look at nationalism and nationalist iconic occasions and icons themselves, they're painted by artists even today. We have no artists saying, well, let's go out and paint the Troth Day. The biggest, most colourful festival in Europe, the Troth Day, and it's not captured in art by many people. And you're like, you wouldn't be welcome. You've never had any difficulty painting. We've had, as you say, this last couple of years, by this year when it was the 12th at home, but previous years where the ministers from the south were queuing up to the contest, and loved the occasion and loved the day. Uh, don't get me wrong, local people go, well, that's not our experience of it. We'll have to say it maybe wasn't during the Troubles,
Yeah.
but then people were trying to kill the police who were guarding the parades. People were trying to attack the people who run the parades.
Yeah.
Parades sometimes defended themselves.
Yeah.
You know, so those were different days. Don't judge it today by the past.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
lived through those days. Things happened both sides. People had to do things
Yeah.
to survive in those days.
Yeah.
But post that, unfortunately, republicanism continues to struggle, but by other means,
Yeah.
not by armed resistance. Yes, the dissidents, but the mainstream do it by undermining and trying to demoralise Protestantism and unionism by this constant barrage of United Ireland's only around the corner, only a matter of time, negotiate your place on it. Well, me and thousands like me don't want part of United Ireland.
Yeah.
I want good relationships with the public.
Yeah.
I certainly do. I want to see where we can trade reasonably freely within whatever the new restrictions are. But equally, it is a foreign country.
Yeah.
And such, we should treat it as a foreign country, but one that we know that many of our own citizens wish to belong to.
Yeah.
So we want to have good relations with it. But look, the actions of the Irish government over the years, they spawned the area in many ways. They set up training camps in the Republic.
Yeah.
The whole arms crisis was back in the news again.
Yeah.
The supplying the area weapons. So anyway, they were the midwife to a certain extent of the modern IRA. So, but yet no, they don't want to talk about that. There's no inquiry into that. There's no call for this or that. Let's look at that again. Let's hold it responsible. Let's pay compensation to those because we helped start the Troubles, etc., etc. So those things are part. But yet no, anything unionism did, or anything the British Army did, is under a microscope and has to be judicially refuted to the nth degree. Nth degree. And it's just, again, I see that as sucking out finance from the government in many ways and trying to make Northern Ireland unworkable.
Yeah. If we go back to what you were saying there about the arts, it was Dan Gordon who I'd love to have on here. Yeah. It wasn't Dan Gordon. It was Philip Orr said whether or not loyalists, the identity has been chipped away. More and more I would agree, even if it's just by demoralisation. Philip Orr said not only, regardless if it's chipped away or not, actually there's a whole culture to be rediscovered.
Totally. And Brian Desmond Hurst, one of the greatest Irish film directors, is from East Belfast. He served in the war and was wounded at Gallipoli. Now, probably some would say, I haven't looked this up, at the end of his life he became a nationalist, but he signed the Ulster Covenant at the beginning of his life, so there's someone we can be proud of, even if he did become a nationalist at the end of it. He was a East Belfast man, he was born a Protestant, he was a unionist at one time, and I think it was John Ford said he was the greatest Irish film director of the 20th century. Malta's story, Tom Brown's Schoolboys, there's been retrospectives of Queens about him and all. So there are people like that. Philip Orr's totally right. There's playwrights to be rediscovered, etc. But again, there's not the people that are promoting.
Yeah, well, you mentioned St. John Irvine. He truly fascinates me. Apparently, again, this is very hard to find. If you go on the JSTOR, the academic catalogue online, I've came across this article when De Valera spent a year or two in America. Apparently, St. John Irvine was also over there, and they stood on the stage and had a debate. And De Valera obviously gave his spiel, which we're all very aware of. But St. John Irvine then gave his rebuttal and stood up for the Union. Now, that's the sort of stuff that I'd love to see, being caught in drama or whatnot. But what's happening, and I've mentioned this before, is the South is doing a huge amount, Dublin's doing a huge amount. Instead of looking at two Irishmen who were on different sides of the coin, thought of events at that time, what they're apparently Screen Ireland is funding a production on when Michael Collins went face to face with Churchill and De Valera, and to me it's just tiring because it makes it into an Irish English question when
there's Ulstermen involved.
It was a lot more.
But even putting the spotlight in that area of politics again, 21, etc. It's all new. It's never been looked at before, really. I don't believe by either side. And then particularly how the War of Independence came to an end and how partition came about, the talks at Buckingham Palace, the King, all that, Carson's involvement, Collins' involvement. You'll get the Republican narrative, but there's been no real work done. I don't believe, or I've seen, and Carson's involvement in that, and Craig's
Yeah.
involvement in that. And I actually think there's a good blueprint there for how people engage with the enemy. Because if people say, "Oh, you shouldn't talk to Republicans, you
Yeah,
shouldn't talk
yeah.
to Sinn Féin," etc. But sometimes your case goes by default if you don't talk.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I'm someone who won't talk to the Trades Commission, but that's an entirely different argument. So, you pick your tactics for whatever argument. But I think there's a story to be told about the talks that went on in Buckingham Palace.
Yeah.
And all that time, it hasn't been researched. I hadn't heard that since in Irvine.
Yeah.
It's interesting, my own church is the blue plaque for St. Irvine, because he was born near the church.
Right. Okay.
And we have the plaque, and the whole thing about the Peacock Theatre and in Dublin and being the manager of it. No,
The Abbey Theatre, wasn't it?
sorry, the Abbey Theatre, sorry,
Yeah.
not the Peacock, the Abbey Theatre. All that needs to be brought up. But equally, is there a market for that within the unionist community who want to be reminded of that? Because do the middle class want to know that again, or are they happy enough with what they have? That all needs to be looked at. But I do think there's an opportunity next year in 2021, a centennial of Northern Ireland, to rediscover some of this,
Yeah.
and for people to rediscover their past and
Yeah.
their own antecedents in
Yeah.
history, and to move forward and
Yeah.
build on. Because attitudes have changed. Attitudes on all sides aren't the same as they were in 1912,
Yeah.
1921, or 1930. We live in a different world from a year ago,
Yeah,
never mind
yeah,
10
yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
So things have to be looked at. We have to adapt how we react to other people, as long as we don't give up our principles.
Yeah.
And that's very important for me. We stick to core principles. And for me, in my personal circumstance, that's my Christian faith, as expressed through my Protestantism,
Yeah.
and it's also my unionism.
Yeah.
Now, I get asked many times to take part in debates about what do you want your place to be in.
Yeah.
I don't take part in them,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's not a debate.
Yeah.
That's a monologue against me, telling me what I should do.
Yeah.
Do I want to discuss about all Ireland and the shared island?
Yeah.
A shared island? I'm
Yeah.
happy to talk about that,
Yeah.
because I'll argue for Northern Ireland
Yeah,
being
yeah,
the main part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I need to convince, and unionism need to convince the vast majority of people here that that's the best case. I don't think we'll have a problem over the next lot of years because of the economic situation brought about COVID. The
Yeah,
South's
yeah.
going to be broke, UK will be broke as well.
Yeah.
We'll probably be a bit better off. So our living standards, I think, going to remain higher than the South.
Yeah.
So you're going to, a lot of soft nationalists, for want of a better, I don't like the term, but
Yeah.
will say, no, our economic
Let's just keep it.
is better, let's keep
Yeah.
it within the United Kingdom, and that will keep us there. But also, not everybody's a cultural unionist like me in many ways, and
Yeah.
I'll always be a unionist, no matter what. But that doesn't debar me from debating with people about relationships, doesn't debar me about arguing my case,
Yeah.
and I think that's what we've been pretty poor at in the past.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
for good reasons, with the troubles, etc. You weren't going to sit down and talk about the IRA in the middle of the troubles.
Yeah.
So there's been good reasons for those things. But tactics have to change
Yeah.
to survive. 50 years ago, unionists were happy enough. Northern Ireland survived on the
Yeah.
strength of unionist Protestants,
Yeah.
Orange alone. That's not the case, and we have to realise that.
Mhm.
And we have to look at people who mightn't have the same religious beliefs as me, they mightn't have the same moral standards that I would claim.
Yeah.
But we need all those people, might be from the same ethnic background,
Yeah.
but we need all those people to be proud of their Britishness and
Yeah.
proud of being part of the United Kingdom. And that's why I hope everybody next year marks or celebrates the centennial of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
We have a Chinese community here which has been here for decades and decades, which has prospered very well in Northern
Yeah.
Ireland. We have the likes of Lord Ranagh, who sits in the House of Lords now,
Yeah.
who prospered in Northern Ireland. So there's a lot of ethnic people here. The Polish community get on extremely well in their Roman Catholic Denmark.
Of course.
Get on extremely well with the Protestant community,
Yeah.
I have to say, particularly because of the war effort and our joint
Mhm.
stand in the war against Nazism. So there's a lot of good out there and a lot of goodwill amongst ethnic minorities, and we need to build that and encourage that. Now, I'm not saying we'll all join the Orange Order and march up. We will celebrate as the Orange Order will celebrate it, and we have a lot of things planned for next year. But I want everyone to celebrate it, or if not celebrate it, certainly mark it. And I think there'll be a lot of Roman Catholics. In fairness, I think we'll step up to the mark and do that because they're fair about the thing. I don't expect Republicans to celebrate Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I supported the Irish government in their commemorations of 2016.
Yeah.
I went to everything in the Republic I was invited to,
Yeah.
bar anything that celebrated those who I regarded as traitors,
Yeah.
those who were carried out the rising. I didn't go down and commemorate them and
Yeah.
celebrate their
Yeah.
action, but they had a lot of other activities that I went to,
Yeah.
which were badged as 2016 commemorations, but they were more concerts, all Ireland concerts, that type of thing. They're no threat to me,
Yeah.
to be honest, because everybody's entitled to their views and their opinions. It's when it's forced down your throat, or
Yeah.
they try to murder you, or bomb you, or bully you into a united Ireland, and that's what the IRA have done. That's what Sinn Féin's continuing to do,
Yeah.
and carrying the struggle on. They tried it through parades for about 10 years, and there's still issues to be sorted out there. But they moved on now. It's a more subtle attack. It's a more attack to the cultural side of things.
Yeah.
And we just haven't got the response right yet to that.
Yeah.
But we're working on. I think 2021 creates a great opportunity for people to work together to either mark, or in my case, I'll be celebrating the first 100 years of Northern Ireland.
Okay, that's amazing. Amazing content there. For people to hear. There's sort of three things from what you've
Good
said.
Presbyterian number, Brian.
the Holy Trinity. There's three things I was wanting to bring up just really quickly, run past you, and just I need to write these down, otherwise I'm going to forget. What's
At
that?
that stage of life as well.
That town in the middle of Ireland, Athlone.
Yes.
Okay, there's something about Athlone I want to say. The first thing is, which is you were talking about Buckingham Palace and the context of the arts. It's a fascinating period, 1918, 19. I know it's past now, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but like James Craig himself went down to Dublin. You know, the fact that isn't dramatised, it's just
totally. I think there's great drama there of all sorts of things, but probably what will happen will be picked up by a playwright with a nationalist, shall we say, bent, and it will be done from the nationalist point of view. And we're all Anglicans sometimes done from a partial point of view, present the facts, dramatise it a bit, and let people judge their mind, as opposed to what we get a lot of is a lot of revisionism.
Yeah, but it's a fact. I think this is my experience. A lot, even of very middle of the road people down south, it still just comes down to the question of Brits out, because I don't think they still see it as an occupation, as opposed to a million or more genuine, sincere people who just want to stay a part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So by making their representative the Queen or Lloyd George, it makes it seem high, above, and remote. Whereas if you actually say that here's a guy born in Cumber, his parents have been here generations, he's Irish, he's Ulster, but he also happens to be British. Examine him, look at him. That would open up a whole new world of understanding. But no, it always has to be the Queen and Lloyd George, these British dictats.
Well, you're talking about humanising the conflict in many ways, and that's always a good way to build bridges. But equally in the South, my experience is ordinary people are indifferent. Yes, they will sing their rebel songs. But to be honest, I wouldn't see them as IRA supporters. And they want the Brits out as a slogan. Yes, Joe Biden said he didn't want welcome orange. Back there. Those are slogans. I think if you scratch them, it wouldn't be. But what has worried me in the Republic is the rise of Sinn Féin. I have to say that is a worrying trend. Simply because I can't understand why anybody supports a party that murdered their fellow countrymen, that murdered their neighbour, that murdered children, that took on a sleazy, terrorist, cowardly campaign and mounted it for 30 years. And that's, I know, it's history now that many people born don't remember, etc. But it's not that far away to remember the atrocities. And those involved in are the ones that people in the South are supporting. But I find that very hard, because I've always found it hard. Sinn Féin's always at a base support in Northern Ireland, around 100,000. That's grand. I can understand that as being there, support. They know what they do. They buy into the terrorism mark. But for the South to expand now, I can only rationalise it as that they're doing good work on the ground. They've the good councillors. And that's how they rose to power in Belfast, to be honest, because the councillors, I have to say, worked hard on the ground during the Troubles, but not only about the Troubles, about matters of the housing executive, or matters of people's dreams, etc. Councillors deal with. They worked hard on those things, and they earned that support to a certain extent, although there always was that baseline support. But in the South, you have the Fianna Fáil, Fianna Gael, but where did Sinn Féin come all of a sudden, and this young, trendy vote for it? To me, it's a vote for murder. I can say there's nothing else.
I can totally get that. I think that in many ways.
Because unionism is never, we've had political parties attached to paramilitaries. they've never done well. They've been
As a policy.
personality driven,
Yeah.
but they've never got a widespread support amongst the unionist community.
Yeah.
Because unions will not support an organisation that's linked to tire.
Yeah.
I haven't said that unions may give them a nod and approve and say, oh, we've done the right thing there, and all that sort of local thing that went on during the Troubles, which in hindsight was wrong. You know, people were getting killed every day and there was retaliation. So they might have given that nod and approve, but they wouldn't vote for them at the ballot box. And many paramedics didn't expect them to vote for them at the ballot box.
Here's what I would say, because I'm exactly on board with you what you're saying. So I was down in Dublin working a year there, and then I went down to Cork. I went down to Kildare and I went down to Cork and then Skibbereen, and then I had a big flipping 6-7 hour drive, and the whole way back just listened to RTE, and this is about a week or two before the election, and boy oh boy are the Sinn Féin spokespeople on economy housing, do they wipe the floor with every single other party. So I can, for the majority I guess of people, they haven't lived through the Troubles, so they don't know that. All they know is that this guy Pierce Doherty or Owen O'Brien's coming out and just hammering the whatever government there was, and when you have Labour or Green, they just waffle. Whereas look, that's just my observation from having spent 7 hours driving back from Skibbereen.
Sure.
And on the airwaves, he just killed it. And you know, I have people I know in Monaghan, who are in the arts, and they expressed deep support for Sinn Féin and urged their friends, and again that sort of jars with me. But then I just have to remember, well, they're probably just listening to the Owen O'Brien and Pierce Doherty, but at the same time, coming from Monaghan,
and there is a wrong association. Now, the state did come out of a fight in the British, the British out, so their state come out. There's bound to be that people have that aspiration of a 30 county area, and I have no problem with that aspiration whatsoever. As I said before, it's when that aspiration tries to be fulfilled by political balance. That's where I think.
Yeah. Well, here, just another wee thing there. You mentioned Joe Biden. I wanted to just say this because I suppose put it on record. I can't say too much about it, but you know that comment was very telling. You know, no orange here, and it was said in jest. But I remember when I was in New York, there was two things said to me when I was watching the Conor McGregor fight. I was sitting in the bar just drinking a pint, and I don't know, someone heard my accent or something, and there was a fella from when I was over, it seemed to be a lot of boys from Cavan, Monaghan, and Tyrone, and I think he was from Tyrone or something, and he was ISOC or something, just come after Rob Feeney's here, and I'm like, what? Oh, we can't say that's a really bad word. And then it was only afterwards that I realised that he said it in a very triumphalist way. And the other thing was, it was this awards dinner, and of all people, Rosie O'Donnell was speaking at it, and one of her opening jokes was that how her father taught her to eat Protestants, and everyone laughed, and I was like, oh God, you know how when the majority or when the tables turn, suddenly all these things which would be abhorrent that we're spoken about, nationalists or Catholics, are okay if it's Protestants, which then brings me to the other thing I wanted to say to you, because I put this in my head Athlone when you mentioned about the treatment of these border communities. You talk about Cavan and Donegal and your connections through your grandfather, and then connections through friendship and just the lodge. Just a quick thing I was wanting to bring up, I found it really interesting because I did a 32 days and nights tour around Ireland, met all sorts of characters. I stayed in Orangeman, in Armagh.
Good blog about it.
Yeah, and I stayed in Orangeman and Armagh, and 2 or 3 nights later in Louth, I stayed with a guy that was interned in the H blocks, or it was imprisoned in the H blocks. All different characters, but I remember when I was in Athlone, I think it was just a pure coincidence. The guys I stayed with, their father, or their grandfather, he was from Northern Ireland, but lived in Athlone, and one year he used to go up to Northern Ireland every year. You always hear this. It was a big day for him, and he got his collar out, and he had his freshly pressed suit. You always hear that same spiel, and they told me that. And then, but one year he was driving up, and he was stopped at the side of the road, and there's obviously some sort of IRA checkpoint type or improvised one, and said, if you go up there, you'll never be coming back here, son. So he just went back to his house and put it away, and it was never ever.
There was that intimidation that Protestants had to keep their heads down during the Troubles, and totally understandable, because they were living in enemy territory, for want of a better description. So they had to keep their heads down and everything like that. And equally, that wouldn't have been the whole community, might have been quite a bit substantial part of it. But there were still friends there who still wouldn't have been involved in that type of thing. So
Yeah.
you have to look at it through fairness. You know, going back to your American comments there, I attended several of the Irish American gala dinners over the years around St Patrick's Day and the whole White House thing. So, and it's very interesting. What I found is at a certain sphere in America, particularly the money America, most of them, not them all, but most of them didn't really care what part of Ireland you were from, whether they were unionists or nationalists. There was a bit of celebrity status about Adams, so he got a bit more attention. They wanted their photographs taken with him, etc. But their support wasn't amongst that, with the exception of one or two big supporters. Their support was amongst the Longshoremen's Union. They would leave the gala dinners to go to the working class areas and get their support there. But there's always been a strong Irish American identity, which is Roman Catholic. So that comes through. But equally, I think we could have presented our case better in the States by going over. Again, we had boycotted those dinners for years. And it's easy with hindsight, all this, everything's easy with hindsight, and there's a context of the day, they were supplying weapons. But I certainly found most Americans open to hearing both sides at that stage. And I didn't find them ardent Republicans in the sense of Irish Republicans. But equally, there was a level where yes, there was a strong support for the area. But I think that all comes about because the Ulster Scots evidently assimilated and became American. They wanted to forget their past because many of them were Presbyterians, had been persecuted over here, etc. So they wanted to and they became what somebody says the only true natural Americans in many ways. But all the other groups, the Italians, the Polish want to keep, and the Irish want to keep their identity. So they have a strong sense of community and the organisation still going strong. And all the Irish societies around the countryside. But there's no equivalent really on the American Ulster Scots. And we should have maybe worked more on that. And there's still time to do that next year. There's still time for people to begin to explore that and rediscover that.
And I'm hopefully going to do a wee bit of a blog or something on that, because just through that one little string that I found about St John Irvine, because in my mind it's all this
That's
one
interesting,
that he stood on the table and debated. Apparently it was a delegation, then I think it's Cooper, who was an MP, went with a delegation of Presbyterian ministers to make the case in sort of parallel to De Valera, and then also at the start of the Troubles, I think there was a fella, he was a doctor maybe, who went over. So actually, I'm going to just pull that out, just and look at it, and then as you said, there's no reason why those relations can't be made. I do know if I was over there with
we let Republicans dictate the narrative sometimes. The classic is Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King, a Baptist minister, so from a Protestant background, well, that didn't matter. Tenors actually at the time, he was a Christian, but his whole thing was non-violence. Getting all these hailed by the Republic movement as one of their heroes, and they buy into everything. Everything he was against is what the IRA were. Getting all people say, "Oh, civil rights." I deliberately, not deliberately, but sometimes we sing "We Shall Overcome," which is a hymn, which is a Christian hymn. We sing it in church, and first people were saying that's a civil rights song. My point, of course it is. Of course, it's just because God promotes those civil rights. But it had been taken on by the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Movement. It had been taken on by the group, by the area, and thinking this is part of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy. We're part of that. We're the heirs of that. Everything he said about freedom affects us. Well, actually, didn't he? Was against violence. He was against your undercard movement traps. He was against your murdering people on their work. He was against the murdering civilians, blowing them to bits. But yet no, they can take that and total hypocrisy. Take on that mantle and promote the things as if they're the heirs of man. We're actually, if you want for better, not claim, but he's more aligned to those in the unionist community who didn't resort to violence.
Again, sort of a culture to be found or to be reclaimed.
And the difficulty, there's not enough people looking to reclaim that and do that.
I was just going to ask about your youth, but I'll just say really quickly, it was sort of interesting or telling what potential there is about reclaiming sort of Irish America. I was over there and I bumped into Gypsy, and turned out it was a guy called Bill Gypsy, but it was Chris Gypsy's cousin, and he lives in upstate New York. And then there's Mark, I've forgotten his name, but there's a couple of unionist-minded people over there, and I'm sure there's a catalogue going back further. But the other thing I was wanting to maybe get into, because maybe the listeners or whoever's listening to this would be interested, especially the folks down south trying to make the bogeyman, the orange man sitting in front of us. But you know, like your youth, I was saying to Sammy Douglas, it was quite alarming. It was new to me. I didn't realise how apartheid his upbringing was. You know, I grew up in middle class suburbs, and there's our Catholic neighbours, and we played them from we were children. The only difference came because we went to two different schools, but there was no disharmony, and they came to our barbecues and vice versa. But for you growing up in East Belfast, what was it like?
It'd be similar to Sammy, but to be honest, there've been Roman Catholics that live in Sammy Row as well. They might live next door to Sammy, but there've been Roman Catholics. The vast majority have been Protestant. The vast majority of people where I live were Protestant, but sent my next door neighbours. Well, funny enough, the house next door was originally occupied by Mr. Ovens, who was an old man. I think he had electricity but never used it, but he had turf in the fire. But my earliest memory of him, his brother was murdered by the IRA in the 56 campaign.
Right,
Sergeant Ovens opened the door. So there was an
What happened, sorry?
he opened a door with booby trap.
Right.
Did bits in the 56-62 border campaign.
Where was this?
Again, I'd say Old Island, it could be wrong, but it's somewhere, it may not be there. But then that house then was occupied by Roman Catholics, who became very good friends. I grew up, the children were slightly younger, but they were collected for the bonfire.
Yeah.
They were kids. And then the Troubles came along. And the other thing I should say, I always say this when people look at you, you know, the two most important shops to me were sweet shops growing up. They were both Roman Catholic, one at the corner of the street just across from where I lived, and one at the other corner. I wasn't brought up, they're Roman Catholic going. It was just Roman Catholic going. That actually probably only came out during the Troubles. The pubs locally tended to be Roman Catholic going. There was a school 2 streets away, which children were bussed into, was a Roman Catholic church school. But there wasn't a majority of Roman Catholic.
Is that one on Ballyhackmore?
It's Richardson Street off the Ravenhill Road. There's a Roman Catholic school there, and kids, it's not there now, but kids were bussed into it. I used to think they get a bus to school after walk. So I used to think we were the underprivileged. But leaving that aside, what happened at the start of the Troubles? Vigilantes movement started up. My father was very active in the vigilante movement, but that was to protect the whole community. And they, we had one of the houses was phone in the street, and when the Catholic shops were coming, they were phoned. The family was phoned from our house, went over and helped they would get, as did other neighbours, do that. But I remember the day the Roman Catholic neighbours left, you know, and that the priest. I seen it myself because it was next door. The priest visited the house. The family then smashed the windows and left, and said they were intimidated out. Now, I put a rider on that. They probably would have been intimidated because the way the Troubles were going, they couldn't survive, and people were beginning to get shot. So I think they were going to leave anyway. But I remember that as well. I watched the windows being broken by themselves. Now that's, don't get me wrong, they were going off to go anyway, so it was a matter of, I think, they were wise to go at that time. But the narrative said they were put out, and it probably would have come to that. But I found it very sad, to be honest, to see those kids I'd grown up with who used to cry because they couldn't walk on the 12th of July after collecting for the bonfire, that type of thing. Yet no, there were other families, cousins of theirs who lived around the corner who would have been overtly Republican. That family wouldn't have been overtly Republican, but who would have been out in 66 and the parade in the Falls Road, etc. Were in the boxing club, didn't mix locally too much with the children, played a bit, but there would be very much life would evolve around the chapel and other things, you know. So, but to be honest, I grew up, it wasn't a mix, it was predominantly Protestant, but the Roman Catholics lived in there. I wasn't at family who were Roman Catholics, so I was never brought up to hate Roman Catholics. I have to say that's very strongly. I grew to hate republicanism, violent republicanism, because they were murdering my friends. Ultimately, they were trying to murder me and my family, and that was going across the province. So I believe many chose to do their bit against that and fight the terrorism of the IRA. And indeed all terrorism ultimately.
I suppose with this, I try to keep the podcast or discussions quite positive, or upbeat, so that people don't get into a tit for tat of, like, in the comments or whatever, saying like, oh, this happened or that happened. But
and I explained that one, not tit for tat. In fact, I explained we probably would have went out and been put out anyway, but it was just that was my lived experience of
Yeah.
what happened. I'm not saying everybody broke around and moved out. That's
Yeah.
across Belfast, not the case. Population shifts were moving.
Yeah.
Protestants moved into the house and vice versa.
Yeah.
They were swapping
I,
homes.
I think that's what I'm just trying to say. That I think sometimes you read history, it was all one way, and certainly a friend of mine, he grew up in the Craigie estate. They were Catholic, and I think they had to leave.
Oh, no doubt. And vice versa. Protestants, Protestants lived at the bottom of Newton Arch Road. One of the favourite stories is a famous family at the bottom of Newton Arch Road, but near Seaford Street, and they're putting the Protestants out of the area, and they had to get out. So there was always a warning, to get out. There's a couple of nights to burn you out if you don't get out. So the coal lorry, the usual coal lorry, was brought up to bring out, and the old grandmother insisted the first thing went in that coal lorry was the big drum from the local band.
Right. Okay.
That was her priority. Was to save the drum from the local band before the house was burnt down. And I think that was the spirit of people in those days. What came first in many ways was your unionism, was your faith. Those things that were important, save them, and then they had to move out. Those houses had been occupied by Roman Catholics. So it worked both ways. There was a mass shift of population across Belfast, and in many ways exchanging houses. As people were put out of where they were a minority, they had to move.
Goldglass or something, was that one where a lot of...
Well, that would have, there have been several. Goldglass probably a bit later on to a certain extent, some of it, but certainly I'm talking about the 70s here, early 70s, 71, when people began to get put out of living in streets because they were the only Catholic or the only Protestant family.
Changing direction a wee bit, what was it like having the Taoiseach at the Orange Museum?
It was very interesting, I have to say. I was a great day, I have to say. Generally the sun was shining like the day in many ways, but it was we understand the significance of the visit for us to bring the Taoiseach up. I've already stated what I've thought about the Irish government at times, and it couldn't have been done before. I think it helped that Fradga had no particular baggage. No doubt he's a nationalist, etc. But he wasn't from a particularly fervent Republican family who had a history of murdering Protestants in the Republic or attacking British soldiers. So that probably made it easier of his own personal background. I think times had changed. It was the right thing to do. We were wanting to talk about the interest of our brother in the south, as well as building a relationship. He was genuinely interested in the artefacts instead, quite a bit longer. The usual civil servant trying to usher him out. And he more or less told him to be quiet. He was interested.
What was he interested in seeing?
He was just the artefacts. When he was shown around by the creator of the museum, he would stop and
That's David Scott, is our friend David?
No, it was John Madison's our doctor who created the museum. He was showing him around, and he would have been saying that such and such. Well, tell me more about that. He wanted, so he was interested. So it was significant, and it was interesting. We hadn't really advertised it, that it was happening, but there was a crowd gathered outside of local people and seeing something was happening. The cameras were there, and there was a spontaneous round of applause. And the crowd were local unionists. So they were glad to see him. So people are.
How do you react to that? Was it just sort of like?
Oh, he was very. I think I never talked to some. He was very. And his visit, very relaxed in his visit. And of course we planned it. These things would happen. And we planned it. And he paid his respects at our memorial window to those who were murdered during the Troubles. Which was a big thing too for us, for people to do that. And so it was good to have him in the building.
And was it Michael D? Did you have him up?
No, Michael Higgins hasn't been up. No.
But was there not some
Michael
you met down to him?
The Michaelises were at the opening. He was no longer present at that stage.
But did you not go down to Oireachtas or whatever?
I've been around the Oireachtas, but not with Brian Higgins. There was a different emphasis.
The president?
Higgins, no, not the current president. With Michaelise, there was a different outreach to unionists, which I think was a very positive outreach. I don't think Michael D. Higgins has the same. It's not fair to say the same interest in outreach, but he's a different. I was going to say I don't know what it sounds, but he's a different kind of fish. He's into this poetry, he's into this and that, but he certainly doesn't do the same outreach. He chooses to what he called, I think, promote the arts and all through his. He's not that I see. He certainly didn't do the Macaulay. I think the Macaulay's just did a good job breaking down barriers. And they weren't perfect to begin with. That problems with Mary Macaulay's, the things she'd said, and different things. But put them to the side for the greater good, and let's begin to talk. And I have to say, I had my own church congregation down the bus run, down with delegations that involved members of the Orange Institution, involved ex-combatants, paramilitaries, etc.
No.
And there's always a warm welcome. Particularly her husband sometimes doesn't get the recognition that he did in the background of talking.
He was from Dublin, wasn't he?
Breaking down barriers. No, he's from Ross-Trevor, I believe. Could be wrong, but
That's just by 1 point.
Yeah.
So that's County Down.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I'm nearly sure it's from Ross-Trevor. I could stand corrected.
And I suppose I brought up Athlone because I meant to sort of go into again just out of interest. I found the whole sort of fact that there were Orangemen in the south just truly fascinating because as far as I was concerned, the south was one monoculture.
We're the Grand Lodge of Ireland. We're not the Grand Lodge of Northern Ireland. We've always been the Grand Lodge of Ireland. We had a brilliant, in fact, we were part of the exhibition we had planned for this year at the museum, but we couldn't do because of COVID, was a resolute people, and it was looking at the Orange history in the Republic of Ireland, not only sadly the recent history from partition, which isn't always great, but the Orange influence before that. You know, don't forget they blew up the Boyne Obelisk, they blew up King William's statues. So a lot of that was people had to move out.
By Trinity College used to be the statue.
That's
It was blown up, wasn't it?
I think there was a couple of different statues blown up of King William, but the Boyne Obelisk was the big one, blown up at the Boyne. But we're looking to do something down there to mark that it's still a site, and we're working with the government in the south and the local council to see what we can do. And I go with a lodge that meets down there once a year, and has a short parade around there. So you know, and there's no issues have to say.
I guess so. The reason why I find it fascinating because it just sort of cuts against your well, not your understanding, your perception. Well, there's people down south who are unionist minded, but the second big interest for me was, and I think this is the sense the nationalist Republicans have, that unionism is sort of like it'll just wither away. It's not actually sincere. So 100 years after partition, there's these still people who have the Protestant faith and are still British unionist minded. So that actually is a barometer for where we're going. It's not about assimilation. These are true. True convictions.
So people who we betrayed, let me add, as unionists, we betrayed them and we cut them off. During partition. Anyway, this partition isn't easy for the unionists in the Republic because our forefathers betrayed them. I could argue for pragmatic reasons, had to be done, we couldn't survive without it, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, we said to fellow unionists and fellow Orangemen, sorry, you're going to the Republic, we're looking after Northern Ireland. So, and even in spite of that, they still remain culturally British and unionist now, and I have the utmost respect for them for doing so.
It was fascinating. I remember then getting into that, and it was like Colonel Saunderson said, you know, sort of lamenting the betrayal. He talked about, you know, we and Cavan.
Carson was an Irish unionist.
But the guy from the Cavan MP or whatever it was, Colonel Saunderson said, we and Cavan were the most loyal. And I was like, whoa, that's like truly fascinating. You know, be interested to get into that. But then,
bear in mind, Donegal UVF was bringing in guns before the Clyde Valley were in. You know, so they were. That claim isn't untrue. They were solidly unionist.
But then I suppose for these Orangemen that still hold true to their faith and their sort of political allegiance in a way. Then you'll have, is it Heather Humphreys, who I find that fascinating. I was actually there the day she gave a talk at the Fisherwick building at the head of the Presbyterian Church.
No, I know Heather, but I've heard her speak. I've been shared platforms with her. She's been on occasions. Orange Halls has been in the Republic, and she'd be a Presbyterian. But equally, not everybody has to be said. You know, there's a lot of Presbyterian churches aren't in the Orange down the south. So the whole community survived and kept their faith. But the like of Heather became Fenegal Gales.
But she at
she'd be a nationalist now. No issue with that.
That's what I'm saying.
But her culturally would be the Britishness and the Unionists, etc. But she's decided to become an Irish, and I have no issue with that.
But what she said was it was a bit like listening to Kamala Harris, the way she talks, like, you know, my great grandfather 100 years ago signed the Ulster Covenant, and little would he have known that 100 years on her great granddaughter whatever would become, and she was fascinating. Minister for Arts during the centenary of 1916 was sort of
Tony Blair's mother, wasn't it?
Grandmother
signed the Ulster Covenant. From a strong unionist stuff.
But what I suppose
every family's got bad apples.
that you see is is there a future, or is it just going to wither away?
No, it's not. It's survived this long. There'll always be a future for. There should always be a future for minorities in any country.
Yeah.
And to be honest, how they treat it, the whole thing about I forget the name of the TD who bragged about putting them in Sing Sing about murdering Protestants in the Dáil.
Yeah.
You have the whole Tom Breen and all there.
Yeah.
That whole, Tom Breen, that whole history of republicanism within the Dáil and anti-Protestantism. Not totally. There were some who weren't, but the vast majority of Armenians would be anti-Protestant because it was Protestant tended to be unionists.
Yeah.
You'd be anti-unionist. You're burning the big house down.
Yeah.
You were attacking local unionists, as you see them as spies, or shot, etc. You have that sad whole history. But I think I think people are saying, well, we need to look after the unionists better in the south so as to entice the northern unionists.
Yeah.
No, you should look after the unions in the south because you should look after them full stop.
Yeah.
You look after all your minorities.
Yeah.
But sadly, other minorities are being lauded and looked after.
Yeah.
And unionism wasn't. It was seen as it shouldn't. I think there's been a change in that.
Yeah.
There are issues that we still have to raise within the last month that have been under the government of the south about certain things that have been happening against the unionists and Protestant community in the south, which I think need raised.
Yeah.
And totally they'll raise it with their own government through like a Heller and others. But also because we're an All Ireland organisation, I have an interest in those people.
Yeah.
And they belong to the Orange institution. So I will look after as best I can or represent their views. But equally, ultimately, it'll be politics and through people that will make the difference.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It stretches. I got a book, can't remember where, but it stretches right, not just Cavan, Monaghan, Donegal, but into Leitrim still.
Yes, with members in Leitrim. But look at places like Bandon, where it used to be said that even the pigs were Protestant in Bandon. And it wasn't. That's where the colleague on TV who grew up there said it was easier. Graham Norton said it was easier to be gay in the south than it was to be a Protestant.
Yeah.
And in his book, so that gives you some idea what it must have been like.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about the Orangeman, about Protestants generally in the Republic.
So I mentioned this before we got chatting, because this is something that really interests me. So you're mentioning something there about these, was it it's not Frank Fane, no, can't mention that because that's an existing senator.
Frank
Aiken.
Frank Aiken's the boy. Yes, I couldn't remember the name.
And then he wouldn't be as boastful, but there was TDs who would have boasted about what they got up to.
Yeah, he boasted too. I have to say.
Yeah. So right, so if I can explain this right, because I don't know if I can come up with something new. In Northern Ireland, you have to respect the two traditions. So if you get any sort of public funding, like you go to the Ulster Museum, it's not just the Irish Proclamation or the Ulster Covenant, it has to be the two. And you have to sort of look at everything through the lens of the two traditions, cross community, good relations, so on and so forth. But if there's truly to be good relations in like a shared island or whatever, if you've raised these issues about what happened in Cork 100 years ago, and that still resonate for people from the Protestant Unionist persuasion, even Northern Ireland.
I still remember those things. Yeah.
No, but the like there's a museum just opened up in Cork to look at the hunger strikes that happened then. But there will be. It was talked about how it's very important to educate the Irish youth about the struggle for Irish freedom. But why is there's no examination of maybe some of?
Well, there's maybe no market for it, to be honest with you. You're opening somewhere in Cork. There's not a big Protestant popular union population to tell the story. But equally, I hope any museum will have space in it if it's open and fair to tell the narrative of the other side. And now there's limitation. And I say, what's the Orient Museum do about that?
Yeah.
No, we're not going to tell the RA story. But when you walk in the door, there's not John's secrets out here, but there's a man on the white horse, and you ask all the school kids come through the door. That's it's not a King Valley. It's actually not even a Williamite soldier. It's a Jacobite soldier.
All right.
And he wears white in his hat because green was the colour of the Jacobites. So sorry, wears white. The colours were mixed up. So
okay.
And so this fools everybody to think, oh, that's King Valley, it's one of his men. It's not. It's a Jacobite soldier. So we tell the story from both sides of what happened at the point. And I think every museum should be open to do that. To try and tell history as honestly as ever. Warts and all.
Yeah, but I suppose what I'm saying is, you go to Belfast, you've got a whole plethora, and generally the whole vibe is cross community.
Well,
whereas,
I have no issue if both sides tell their story equally. The difficulty is when you get bias, and this happens in academia. This is like Queen's.
yeah,
You have a couple of professors there now who are overtly Republican.
yeah,
Well, how can they be fair to be teaching
yeah,
when they're overtly Republican? Unless, I would like to see their classes examine what are they teaching. Even when I was at Queen, when people had talked about discriminations, if it was just automatic, it's a thing you believe it was taken for granted. Whereas I would say you have to look at discrimination in context and everything else and
yeah,
examine it now. But so there's a lot of revisionism going on, and sadly there's a lot of it in academia. And places like Queen's and other academia need to begin to look at how they're teaching their students. It's almost the fact that you see brutality. It's almost the fact that they shoot to kill. Those aren't facts at all.
yeah,
They're disputed.
yeah,
People have different versions of them,
yeah,
but they're being taught in certain places
yeah,
as fact.
yeah.
And we have to begin to look at that and challenge that revisionism. And it's up to everybody to challenge that
Yeah,
revisionism.
I suppose just to reiterate that, it's like the James Craig statement that is said alone. We always hear about, because I was very proud of industry in Northern Ireland. And my mum always talked about Harlan Wolff and
Sure.
the road works and so forth. But yet you always brought up all the shipyards expulsions. Now, not trying to justify it, but actually if you look into history, the reason why it happened was because a BV march in Castle Dawson was attacked. And then the other thing that you have to actually look at is the shipyard management and the labour union and most of society condemned the attack, but yet it's just, the history is just taught that.
And that's exactly the case. Many Protestants were expelled from the deep sea docks, which was a Roman Catholic trade. And those things happened, but nobody talks about that.
What was that?
Protestants would have been expelled from Roman Catholic businesses at that
Deep sea
time.
docks?
Traditionally in Belfast, the deep sea dockers have been Roman Catholic. It's a trade.
What's a deep sea docker?
Deep sea docker.
Underwater?
For the ships coming in, if you know what I mean, you dockers, different dockers, shall we say.
They go under the water?
No, they were deep sea. It's where the ships come in, the bigger ships come in.
Right, okay.
They were dockers, and they would have unloaded them and
Right, okay.
docked them and all. But that traditionally would have been a Roman Catholic.
Yeah, yeah.
No doubt Protestants were expelled from that at times.
Yeah, yeah.
Or any other Roman Catholic factory.
Yeah.
It would have happened in reverse.
Yeah.
But it's always talked about the shipyard. But the fact I always think about the shipyard, I believe it was Joe Cahill got a claim for asbestosis out of the shipyard.
Oh, really?
So if the shipyard was so bad, how did Joe Cahill work there long enough to get asbestosis?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was Joe Cahill. I need to double check on
Yeah.
it. So Catholics always worked in the shipyard. Was there times of expulsions and tensions? Of course there was.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole Sam Thompson's over the bridge.
Yeah.
Of course Catholics were expelled. But if you looked at a Roman Catholic in the south, were Protestants expelled in the south from jobs? I suspect you'll find there were plenty of occasions when that happened as well.
Yeah.
They had to go home and take pension.
Yeah,
work
yeah.
here, get out,
Yeah.
or you're through out because of this and that.
Yeah.
So again, there's no but it's easy to say, oh, the shipyard was Protestant,
Yeah, yeah.
blah, 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 blah. It's easy to throw those things out. And equally, do you want to get into counterbalance? Well, this happened over here.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest about the thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as truthful about these
Yeah.
things. That's problem. Bad things happen on all sides.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Bad things
that's
happened years ago. Slavery was wrong years ago.
Yeah.
Not everybody was against slavery in those days because of the content.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, it was absolutely abysmal to support slavery.
Yeah.
With
yeah.
our worldviews of what we know now.
Yeah.
But in the context, and that's not justifying slavery by any means,
Yeah.
but you have to look at both sides.
Oh, yeah.
And the day, what was the culture of the day?
Yeah.
And that's very important. And that's not just, nobody should have been expelled from the shipyard, but nobody should have been expelled because they're Protestants from other organisations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There shouldn't have been gerrymandering in London there.
Yeah.
But there was gerrymandering in the south, there was
Yeah.
gerrymandering in other council areas, there was gerrymandering in Scotland.
It's gerrymandering to this day.
And to this day, so those things happen. But what Republicans and Nationalism are very good is taking a sound bite out and elevating that into something that
Yeah.
we were the only people doing it, that the Unionists were the bad boys all the
Yeah.
time. We were the saints. We were fighting. We took the pike out of the Thatch.
Yeah.
Romanticism
Yeah.
of republicanism is there. It's not. Terror is terror, whether it's by
Yeah.
Michael Collins or Jerry Adams.
Yeah.
It's still terrorism.
Yeah. I think what I'm saying is, and this might, because we've been so, I don't know, browbeaten, for as long as I've known, it's always about good relations across community, hand across the aisle, accommodate both sides.
So my key word there is, coming across it, is toleration.
Yeah.
We need toleration before you build relationships.
Yeah.
And like the Orange institution isn't tolerated by, and you people like a government body like the Praise Commission can discriminate.
Yeah.
Parts of Belfast, Donegal Street on the 12th of July, Orange can walk down but no supporters. So that's a no-go area for Protestants
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
12th of July. To come down and support a parade.
yeah.
I was in negotiations with the priest at one time. He said at that stage he had a student at that. He had a student steps and welcome bands playing hymns, but no, the Parades Commission ban all music. So you beat a sinister drum beat. Who's forcing us to do that drum beat? We're happy to play hymns. Said that openly, said that, agreed with the priest. No, you must play a because it makes it more sinister.
Yeah.
And there is this whole culture in Parades Commissions and others who are there, particularly hangovers from the area campaign against parades or the Sinn Féin campaign against parades, still need to be dealt with because there is that nature that the Orange Order are this and that and that, and they will only do that and they'll only cause trouble, and that sadly is not the case.
Yeah.
Sadly not the case in the most. Sadly that's the way they portray it all the time. Was there trouble with our parades? Yes, there was trouble with our parades. Were parades attacked that we defend ourselves? Yes. But some people sometimes attack others from their parades or show disrespect to chapels. Of course they did. And they say that was wrong. On the day, maybe felt the right thing to do at that time because of what was happening, maybe people murdered the day before, etc. etc. It should not. I think we're in a new dispensation. I don't think people can find today of incidents of people passing a chapel and playing deliberately outside it. But because that happened in the 50s and 60s, people's mindsets are, well, that's all they'll do. That's what they're like.
Yeah, well, that's the mindset almost I had. I was
and that's the mindset. We're open to change those things, etc., etc. And sadly, the hangovers of the Parades Commission and other groups who are, I think, who discriminate against the institution need to be looked at and need to be addressed. And their biased view against the institution needs to show that you need to tolerate our culture, and that includes our culture. That includes the Orange culture. If we can tolerate nationalist culture, we have to do that. I have no issue tolerating nationalist culture. Where I have difficulties is where that becomes like Jerry Kelly's statement the other day, where he makes fun of the death of somebody. That's just totally wrong.
Yeah, it was good to have a bit of leadership from the Taoiseach.
Yep.
I thought that was very good. Maybe that if we try to wrap it up, ask this quite quickly. So, you know, when Arlene came out and said about like, you know, you don't feel like you feed the crocodile because I'll come back for more. You know, when that was great hay made out of that and pageantry, and that was the whole thing.
Offence.
Yeah, but yet, you know, when Jerry people almost forget about that thing he said about Trojan horse. You know, or even saying unionist dress. That was Trojan
there's
horse.
a lot of other things that was said about unionists and a lot of comments. Words are words.
But there's also, and I see again, because you're sort of told the sort of projection is not to read into this, go with the whole like unionists are bad thing. What's it, that thing that you'd always see come up, the comment, you know, where you basically wrote, don't think that this came out of nowhere. This was built upon years of groundwork. What was that in reference to?
Basically what happened was after the IRA ceasefire, you had a lot of IRA volunteers and Republican activists who had nothing to do because they were no longer planning to plot murder British citizens and members of security forces and blow up their towns. So they needed something to do. And the Orange was coming out of that situation of the troubles that we had been in the security forces, etc. And so our parades became a target. They began to say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't parade there. And we set up residence groups. And these weren't spontaneous residents. As Adam said, I think it was in County Meath at a conference, he was taped to say to his own people that these things hadn't come about just by chance. It was a plan of the areas to attack the culture. You didn't say that in my words, but to frustrate and attack the Orange culture by banning parades. That, and I always say, parading for us is a principle, for them it's a tactic. So once they achieved that, they got the Parades Commission did their dirty work for them, they slipped away. But the difficulty we're left with flawed legislation, that if others decide that they don't like a parade, our parade will be stopped tomorrow. We need that flawed legislation addressed. We need the culture of the Parades Commission, which was biased against the institution, we need that changed, and we need that thing addressed. But Adams had worked on it, but they've moved on to something else. I think they're moved on to more subtle now. Moved on to the let's have a debate about the United Ireland. Well, they tried to, you know, put Martina Anderson and Beaver as the Union Secretary officer, you know. I don't know where
like
that comes from. I think that was a drunken night out, to be honest.
That's like having
yes.
Andrew Jackson as like the outreach officer for the Native Americans.
There's all sorts of analogies there. But basically what they called they've moved on from parades, and now they could go back to parades tomorrow because the legislation is still there. But they've moved on to more subtle cultural things, festivals, items, and they moved on to this talk about the United Ireland and everything else. And they're supported by quite a lot of people from the legal professions, from accountancy, from professionalism, and backing them in all these new narratives.
And just
and also there's still the judicial reviews and all the inquiries after inquiries at the demand. And those people will not sit until they get the truth in their terms. They don't want the truth, they want the truth as they see the truth. And that's sad. Because that will damage relationship for years.
Well, maybe I'll just say this very quickly, and then one last thing. The flag around the corner, it's now restricted. It's never going to go back up around the clock. And likewise, I'm just playing devil's advocate. The Parades Commission, that's never going to go away, is it?
Well, I have to say it has to go away. It's not never going to go away. It has to go away for fairness. Well, you're right. You see, your question is the attitude. It's assumed nobody will take the Parades Commission away because Republicans don't want it to go away. Because if it goes away, there could be violence. Who's the violence from Republicanism, etc., etc. And actually, the one thing it can't go away, it is under the jurisdiction of the British government. It is not under the jurisdiction of the local administration. So it can be changed and it can go away. But that defeatist thing, I'm not saying you're going to defeat, but the nature of the question was, ought to never go away. It has to go away. So things have to happen for to move on, and that toleration has to come about. And we have to play our part in that as well. But let me, as you finish off, let me leave you with a challenge before your last question. I would ask the art world, not only artists in the sense that, but also playwrights, musicians, what do they plan to do? Or leave you with the challenge. Do something for 2021 that leaves a legacy that comes from a celebrating or a marking Northern Ireland centenary, as opposed to just forgetting about it, not marking it in the arts. I think it needs to be marked at every level, and not least in the arts, so as future generations have good plays they can go and see from a neutral perspective. Have works of art they can go and admire or study or think about. It makes them think. Have poetry being the institution of launched a poetry and a music writing competition and a songwriting competition, just to try and get people to think about. Now, no doubt we'll get certain songs and hymns even along our traditional way of thinking, but I want a broader unionist approach, and people like yourself, artists of standing, doing work, doing a body of work that encapsulates some of it 2021.
Well,
not even an answer.
I do say I'd love to see it. So we'll end it on that.
And it's not only you, but the whole art world.
Well, we'll see what happens. But I'll just say in closing, because I might have said this to you. When you're talking about the Parades Commission, or just one wee quick comment. I think one of the big turning points for me on my journey was when I was down for the Donovan Rossa centenary, 2015 I think it was, and I was by.
He was our Freeman Day.
It was by the City Hall in Dublin, or Dublin Castle.
I'm not sure.
And if I had closed my eyes, I would have thought it was. So in the morning it was the official state centenary, Michael D and Fine Gael, and in the afternoon it was Sinn Féin did their parallel one, and there was all these Republican bands. And if I had closed my eyes, I was in Belfast in the 12th, and as I watched them parade up the Glasnevin Cemetery, they were every bit as unruly and gaudy and triumphalist. Triumphalist is a big word, supremacist. As the most excessive.
I have to say, I have to challenge that. Our bands, I have the utmost respect for our band committee. I wouldn't say it was really ungodly. In fact, any Republicans have no doubt talked about this, wish their bands were anywhere near the standard of our band. Our bands have come a long way, and the musical talent in them and the way they carry themselves, I think second to none. And I think you'd find hard pushed to point to a band that regard them as unruly and all the rest.
They were as triumphalist and supremacist as the worst example, as the very worst example of a loyalist band. It was truly discordant and sort of like jarring. All you hear is like it's supremacist and triumphalist, and then you
analyse that too. But it's triumphalist because a band plays a particular tune, because it's, should it be, you know, Rule Britannia, or No Surrender or whatever, does that make it triumphalist?
Yeah.
You know, because I'd expect bands in the South to play A Nation Wants to Gain,
Yeah.
Wearing of the Green, those are national songs. Does that make them triumphalist?
Yeah.
But it does, you see, when you're talking about Northern Ireland bands, people do talk about triumphalism. But your point is, there's no different from bands in the South. So it's not their triumphalists, they're playing their own tunes to support their political views, support their outlook on money within their community.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make them triumphant.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
But Republicans use that phrase that talks about troubles. So we're triumphant about a battle that happened 300 years ago. And you know, where do we stand today? Where many things already outlined about the police having to declare membership and all. There's many things we're second class citizens, and nearly you could say in Northern Ireland. So we're not triumphalists.
Yeah.
All we're doing is commemorating and celebrating a battle that we believe brought civil and religious liberty for all people, brought the freedom of the press, brought democracy. You know, there's constitutional democracy. There's a lot of things in Ireland. Indeed, the Constitution of States say owes itself to the Battle of Boyne, the Glorious Revolution, etc., etc. So that's what we're celebrating. We're not celebrating a Protestant king beating a Catholic king. That's what happened, but it was a European battle. And otherwise we're celebrating. But people don't appreciate that. So we're triumphalists all of a sudden, which is always seen as bad and wrong.
Well, you're pointing out things from a very sort of constitutional point of view, in that what happened there was truly revolutionary, you know, the Glorious Revolution, and actually there is information, history to be pulled out. So hopefully going forward that will happen, and that people
listen. Be the challenge of the month.
People can
begin to build for
people
for
can
the next 100 years.
People can divorce what their perception of you is, that you're some drunk Cree hooligan, but no, actually you're.
And I was proud to be a drunk Cree, but I wasn't.
But actually you're very you're a minister and steeped in the history and knowledge and the underpinnings of that tradition, which is actually, if you get into it and past the prejudices, is truly fascinating. So thanks so much for
Thanks for the opportunity, Brent.
Thanks for your time. It was very generous of you. So I'll close this off now.